Don't grieve. Anything you lose comes round in another form. Rumi. Bending Not Breaking. The Dragon Prince Edition. Reflections. Rise Again. Welcome back to another mini episode of Bending Not Breaking, our last one for a little while because season 4 comes out tomorrow. The Dragon Prince is coming back, y'all. We've been waiting for a long time, and I'm just thrilled that we all get a chance to dive into the whole season. Some of us have already watched episode 1, very exciting. I will admit I have not yet. I'm kind of waffling about whether I want to or not. So it's this thought process of like, oh, but if I watch it on YouTube, does it count if it's not on Netflix? But like, I don't know. Anyway, that's a minor thought. Anyway, with that in mind, I just want to have everybody be aware that the podcast is going to be preparing for these full-length episodes that are coming with a lot of incredible guests, including some of the people you've heard on the podcast before and some new voices as well that you've heard on the show. So I know I'm looking forward to connecting with them and sharing those conversations with you. So just as a reminder, before we dive into today's mini, that we do have a Patreon supporting us to do all this work, and we're trying to get our producer to get a living wage for his time doing all the producing that happens. So that will be cool. Feel free to support there. And sometimes we have videos of our conversations, and when I ask these really tough questions, you'll notice that there's often a little squirmy moment. There's really good facial expressions for you to check out if you wanted to join on Patreon, and those are available there. So of course, today we are talking about Rise Again, and Kris and Devon are back with us. So thank you. It feels like this is like a closing ritual. This is our last reflection.
Oh my
So
gosh.
how
Wow.
are you
Yeah.
all today? How are you feeling? This is the last one.
I love this one. I'm excited to talk about it. I've been excited to talk about it. I'm glad we get the chance to have one last podcast to talk about this one because this is it was fun to write. It deals with some very heavy, hefty, uh, meaty issues. Pardon the reference. But
Yikes.
it's almost Halloween, I can say that. Uh
I guess it is pretty poignant. This is going to come out really close to Halloween. So, yeah.
mhm, yeah. But
Hey.
yeah, this one has been I've been waiting eagerly to write this one. We had the kind of the layout, the setup, the order
Mhm.
in line from the beginning, and this was always going to be the last one. And I've just been mulling it over all this time, and then I finally got to write it, and I think it turned out so well. I'm really pleased. I'm really excited, and you're welcome slash I'm sorry to everybody for the
Yeah.
psychic damage.
I'm curious, why was this one the last one that you wanted to release? Or do we have any insight to that?
Um, yeah, you'll notice that I sound like terrible. I've been sick all week. I'm very sorry. But the reason that this one was last, I think, is because um, it's haunting, and I think we wanted to lead into the season with a very sort of like haunting sort of piece about Claudia and the choices she's going to make, because ultimately some of the choices she makes are what will drive the season itself. So Claudia was always planned to be last.
Ooh, gosh. Well, if this is indicative of the theme and tone of the season, then we are in for it. Because this was intense to read, and I was kind of in like I felt tense and on edge as I watched. Where like I say watched, it felt like I was watching it with the pictures that were embedded in there, and it felt like I was watching it because I was just like the way it read, I was just seeing it on the page happening, and I was like, oh no, because here's this 8-year-old raising the dead, and I just like I'm curious. Just what was the experience for you writing this? What was that like? This is just a lot. So I'm curious.
Okay. First, I want to preface this because this actually is more important, I think, with this story than with any of the others. I usually write to music. I pick a song
Hmm.
or some background music of some sort, and I put it on loop, and it just plays in my ears as long as it takes me to write. It becomes the mood, and so I have to choose pretty carefully what music I want, to get the vibe right, etc. And for this, the second that the it crystallized in my head, I knew what music I needed. I messaged Devon and I was like, "Oh my gosh, I know what I'm listening to when I write this one." It's creepy minor key music box.
What?
It's like it's a happy tune, except it's in a minor key.
Uh-huh.
It's the kind of thing you hear in like a haunted house from the distance down the hall,
Oh my
in the
God.
nursery room or something. Ding, 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 you know. And I just that sort of like it's pretty, but it is haunting. That's a very accurate word. And I was
Wow.
like, that's what I want because Claudia is a child and she's acting um uh, in response to grief. She's sad and she's trying to do something about that in order to make her life happier, better than it was. And this is the way that she chooses using the tools that she knows because of the life that she has lived. And she's only 8. She doesn't get as much say in how her life goes as an adult might. So she's in the circumstances that she's in. She looks around and she thinks, okay, well, I have this cool dark magic that seems really awesome. My dad does this. It's very powerful. He can do stuff with this. It's just amazing. I have something terrible and I would like to avoid feeling so horrible about this terrible thing that's happened in my life. This cat has died and that's not right. I want to fix it. I have these tools, I'm going to do it. And the logic of that is very childlike. It's
Yeah.
very, this is what I have, this is what I need to do. I'm sad. It's a kind of an emotional knee jerk in a
Yeah.
way where she's avoiding sitting with her grief.
Hmm.
And I've been kind of curious to see whether the season or the rest of the Dragon Prince will maybe address that or hint at it or allude to it, why Claudia is at this point in her life already. Is it related to her mom leaving? Is there something else in there? Is Soren being so ill when he was younger? Is this, how has all of this settled in Claudia to the point where she's carrying this and she's just a little kid? And then there's this powerful dark magic that can it do anything? Let's find out. Maybe it can help me. What else do I have?
Yeah.
And she's doing her best. And in a way, from the child's point of view, that's makes sense. It's logical. This is just, I got to do something. I got to do something. I can't sit here with this. It's too much to stay. It hurts too much to stay where I am. But from an
Uh,
adult's point of view, with our outside perspective and our outside ethics and morals and things, we look at what she did and we're like, oh, Claudia, what are you doing?
yeah.
Some of us would look at this and be aghast, maybe, or judgmental or something. And she is just a child.
Yeah.
So there's an inside perspective and there's an outside perspective, and both of those are important to consider. And I think that the music that I chose to write to kind of encapsulates all of that in one, where it's beautiful and haunting, and it sort of stays with you, and you
Yeah.
sometimes maybe you can't quite shake it, you get an earworm going. And I think this story kind of has that echoey earworm effect. I've
Yeah.
seen a lot of comments in social media, people talking about it and thinking their way through it. And I'm glad. I'm like, oh, good. It's sitting with you. You're sitting with it. It's staying. You're engaging with this content. And I think that's one of the things that the Dragon Prince does impeccably, is that it makes you consider it.
Yes.
It's not forgettable. You
Yeah.
cannot forget the Dragon Prince, for good or evil, whichever way you want to go with it.
Yeah.
It's an unforgettable source of content and it makes you think. And
Yeah.
that's one of the reasons that I love this ficlet as much as I do, is because it is unforgettable. It just gets in you and you're like, oh, you know.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's what I wanted.
Well, success. Like so, like just from that perspective, is like a check, check, check. It was checking all the boxes, and there's so many things that as you were speaking, kind of I was that were coming around and tossing around in my head that I'm debating, and I think we could go in multiple directions for this conversation. So, part of me is like, who knows where we'll end up, but the things the big points that I think that came up while you were speaking there were the logic of an 8-year-old in relation to their feelings and in relation to grief, right? You know, to an adult, you were talking about how this feels like taboo, very judgmental of this is not like not okay. All the alarm bells are ringing. And I will admit it feels that way for me. This feels like a very like well, that was my reaction. I was like, don't do it. This is bad. I felt very much like Soren, actually. I was like, this is bad. I don't know if I can name it precisely why, but like I'm gonna tell dad. And like I had that reaction, and it feels very irreverent and taboo to use one's ashes to to manipulate this form into happening. And I have lots of questions around like what's actually happening in terms of this. Like, are we it begs the question of like, is there a soul? Are we bringing the soul back into this magical body? Are we like calling it from the other realm, so to speak? Is it just a projection of Claudia's thoughts in cat form that is using the ashes to create that? Like, there's a lot of like implications here that depending on what is actually happening that we just don't know, right? And
Hmm.
it's like there's a lot of things that are happening there. So I'm curious then, I guess I'll ask this question. Um, our brains aren't fully developed until, our mid 20s. And an 8-year-old is given this opportunity to process grief and uses this method of dark magic to avoid the feeling of grief, right? And we grow and become who we are based off what we experience. And what Claudia is learning is that she can avoid tough feelings. So I'm curious, what do you think the impact is on Claudia that she is learning that she can manipulate dead, right? The death in her at 8 years old. Like, I'm curious how this lands in terms of your thought process for her development. It's a big question.
First of
Yeah.
all, I want to say super quick, when you ask all those questions about how the spell actually works, I think they're all valid, interesting answers, and I don't want there to be like a canonical answer as to like what is
Sure.
really happening. Is it the soul? Is it a projection of her memories? I want it to remain extremely open because I think it's creepiest if you get to chew on it and wonder.
That's for
But yeah,
sure.
I
This is
hate it. I
great.
hate it when things are over explained actually. So I'm just like, no, you don't get to know the answer. Is it the cat ghost? Maybe. Is it just her memory? Also maybe.
Yeah. Well, I think that's really interesting because the gravity of it shifts based off the answer, right? The weight of the decision and the ethical responsibility shifts depending on that answer too. And the fact that it's ethically grayer because of that nebulousness is makes it all the more interesting to chew on.
Yeah, and I want to let Kris get to the actual answer. I'm not going to talk about Claudia and how it affects her because I kind of know
Yeah.
the dogs are scratching at my door. Terrible beasts. Um, but
Don't worry, if you kill them you can just bring them back.
yeah, right.
No.
No, 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 no. I don't want where. What was I saying?
Yikes.
Yes. I I think like it's important that Claudia doesn't really know. Like if you look at the book, by the way, it was like 9 p.m. or something, and I was working on this with Stephanie and Co, the publishing team, and they were like, "What do we put in the book?" And they had some sort of lorem ipsum, and I wrote a very, very quick. I don't even know if you knew this, Kris, but like if you zoom in on the book, there's an actual dark magic spell, um, and it's very unclear like what is actually happening. And someone figured it out. They zoomed in and translated it, but it
Yeah, someone
basically
do that.
it's like a dark mage sort of pontificating about like, oh yeah, dog, this totally works. Yeah, you just sprinkle some ashes on the candle and the thing comes out. It's rad. And it's like that clearly the dark mage doesn't even fully understand exactly what they're tapping into. And I think that's interesting because I don't even think an adult could tell Claudia like exactly what the mechanism of this is.
Yeah,
Um, and so like how can
Oh,
the
that's
8-year-old be
interesting.
expected to truly know what they
fascinating.
are grappling with? Anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there.
I, oh my God.
That's amazing.
I
Oh,
have,
wow.
that's just
I have
awesome to
thoughts
me.
now.
Yeah, me too. That's me too.
Oh boy. All right.
Oh, wow. Well, since Kris, I guess you have the capacity to kind of pontificate a little bit and wonder with me here about
Okay.
the effects of this on her development, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
I'm in the middle of a rewatch, right? And I just finished season two, and
Okay.
Claudia just, took out this little doe and restored Soren's a body to its previous capacities. And it's really interesting the willingness and the grief that she was going through in this moment with Soren was on the surface way more than what Soren was grappling with. Soren was like,
Mm-hmm.
you know what? I feel relief. I don't have to deal with all the burdens that I was carrying. I can now be a poet. There was this sense of freedom that was happening. And with Claudia, she was like, too uncomfortable, need dark magic. I can fix this. And was willing to sacrifice whatever happened to her own body, which again, that is also unclear. The toll it takes on the body, whether that's just surface level aesthetic or whether that's also on the soul or whether that's on the spirit, whatever that toll has on the body. So like I see how this moment at 8 years old is tracking to that. It's tracking to what we are
Mm-hmm.
going to see with Viren.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
I see several connections, which just
Mm-hmm.
makes me even more nervous for what's coming. But I'm curious, what's going through your head? What are the connections you see, or your thoughts you have?
I think all of those events act as beads on a string.
Yeah.
They are connected, and there is some sort of through line for all of them, or several through lines. Maybe it's a more complicated weave, and they're not all on exactly the same string. They can kind of sit on the side, nudge up against each other. But starting from a young age to be able to learn that death isn't what you think it is,
Mm,
especially to be able to learn that, oh, oh, that there are things worse than death, because that's kind of a theme, things that are worse than death. Um, and things that are worse than death may be sadness and suffering, um, mourning, being in mourning over something could be worse than death. From a certain perspective,
yeah.
to a child to be like, I have to be sad about this for forever. Oh no, that's too long.
Yeah.
I'm so sad. I can't think about being happy. I can't remember what it's like. This is the worst thing ever. Kids get really invested in um, things that shake them up. They don't have a lot
Yeah.
of life experience to pad them, to pad their emotions, to let them know it's okay to fall for a little bit. You'll have a soft landing. People will catch you, or maybe they won't, but you'll be able to get back up. When
Yeah.
you're 8, you don't know those things, maybe, especially if you've had several shakeups already, like Soren being sick, her mom leaving, and other who knows what else may have happened. Katalis is not, a perfect kingdom, and they're not a perfect family, and she's not a perfect child. Their life is rough sometimes,
Yeah.
and to not be able to trust the world, and so you have to trust yourself. Um, and so you may look for things that can help you do that. And dark magic could be one of the things that Claudia saw quickest,
Yeah. You
to
know what?
be like, look, I can't fix this or that, but I can fix it with this. This power. I don't have a lot of power. I don't have a lot of control, but
Yeah.
dark magic does. So if I can just grab that, I'll be okay. You know.
Yeah, there's there's a line in this that really stuck with me, and that I see as pretty integral to Claudia's character, which is you wouldn't understand or you don't understand when she's talking to Soren. This idea of you don't understand is I see a really big through line between everything that Claudia does on that because and it seems like it starts here. Maybe it started before this, but this is an early enough formative memory that it seems like it starts here with I have access to this power. You don't understand how much pain I'm in and how necessary this is to for me to do this, right? And
Mhm.
then it gets to the point where Callum is judging her about dark magic, and she goes, "Oh, you're being really judgy. You don't
I
understand."
love that
And then
part.
and then it happens later. You don't understand, and I feel like it's the same thing when she like lies to Ezra and say, "Hey, I need a milk fruit bush." But I'm not going to tell you why I need the milk fruit bush. Like I'm just going to avoid it because
Yeah.
she
Yeah.
knows that Ezrin would be judgmental, and you know, that she would say, "Oh, he just wouldn't understand why I have to do this," right? And there's
Mhm.
this lie. Maybe it's not a lie, but there's this confabulation, a lie told honestly, that people don't understand when maybe they actually do, and they just have a different perspective. Um, I'm curious, what is what are your reflections on that as a thought process for Claudia?
It seems like something has gone differently from Claudia's perspective, um, that has made her feel increasingly isolated from even people roughly her age, even her own brother.
Mm,
They grew up in the same household, but Claudia says to Soren, even at this young age, you wouldn't understand, which tells me, which is, why I wrote it this way, that something about them has already diverged.
yeah.
Something has separated them to the point where they were not like one team, they were not on the same side about something or another. And maybe it was just a series of little things. Maybe there was one big event, who knows. But from her perspective at this age, she can tell that she and Soren have different perspectives. She understands that this is already a thing.
Yeah.
And now that I'm thinking about that, a lot of that could have come from her mom leaving. If her mom and her dad had different perspectives, and that fact landed on her, where they could not agree. They could not agree, and they split, and Lissa left. That Claudia can look at that event in her life and say, some things you can't agree on. This is a fact of life. It
Hmm.
is possible for two people who want to work together, who love each other, who used to be on the same side, can somehow not stay that way. This is the fact in my life. I don't like this fact. This is a terrible fact. She
Terrifying.
doesn't, yeah, she doesn't. I mean, even years later when she's talking to Ezra about it's rough on her to remember that moment. She struggles with a little bit when they're talking. And I think that this has become a part of who Claudia is, that she may feel slightly isolated sometimes, and the
Hmm.
more she relies on dark magic in a kingdom where people kind of give it a little side eye, like, oh, I don't know about that. Some
Yeah.
people really appreciate it. Some people, like even Soren, struggle with it, like, oh, I don't like this. This doesn't feel right. And here she is relying on this dark magic to pull her through, to give her power and control in her life where she maybe didn't feel like she really had enough. She was feeling bereft, or she was struggling emotionally,
Yeah.
and partly because she doesn't deal with that. Maybe she runs away from that she ends up maybe relying on dark magic a little more than maybe if she had, I don't know, had a therapist or something when she was 8.
Yeah. I
They
mean,
don't
that's
have those in Catalis
I know, yes, I
yeah.
know. It's
or in
alas,
anywhere in
oops.
Didia or in any fiction, actually.
I know
It's
they
illegal,
don't exist.
Yeah. I
except
literally
Sopranos, and
I
it
just
doesn't help.
I just tweeted I was doing a live tweet of the episode where Viren goes and looks and finds Erebos' name, and then they all disappear. And he comes back, and Erebos like, why you don't trust? I need to trust you. I can't trust you. Why should I trust you?" And Viren's like, or Erebos is like, "You shouldn't."
I love Viren's little breakdown there. It's
But
great.
but this moment where, but Erebos immediately follows that with, but I want you to learn to trust me. And then Viren starts going off and starts just opening up, and Erebos is like, yeah. And I'm like, man, this whole situation could have been avoided if if he saw a therapist instead of Erebos here, because that's what he's.
Erebos is not a good therapist. It's not the
Correct.
one
Oh
you
no,
want.
You
that's
see
terrible.
the relief that Viren has when he just gets to open up and say, "What's on your mind? Who's going against you?" And he just flops in the chair, leans back, and releases all of this. And Erebos is like, "I have him." It's like immediate,
Wow,
and
it
it's
was really that easy. You just had to ask Xavier, and how are you feeling? And he's like, bad.
and that's it. That's all it took, right? That's all it took. And part of me wonders if Claudia had one person where she could be that vulnerable with, that was not using her or planning to manipulate her, that could have solved a lot of problems here. Because and I think what's interesting about that is, you mentioned, Kris, emotional pain, right? This
Hmm.
one of the things that I think that a lot of people don't realize is that the body experiences emotional pain very similarly to physical pain. The brain processes pain when we have heartbreak, when we experience grief. Our brain processes pain the same way that if we get our thumb pricked, right? Which is really, really interesting when you think about how do we cope with our pain, right? Because when we experience something that's like a greater pain than most people ever experience is heartbreak and grief, because a lot of people don't break bones, right? It's one of those things where a lot of people don't have really physical conditions. The only pain they experience is emotional, right? And that's certainly not true for everyone, but it's one of those things where, of course, you're going to figure out, like, if you are in pain, it makes sense that you're going to try and alleviate that pain. It makes sense. And if it is easier for me to experience physical pain than emotional pain, this is often the logic of when people engage in self-harm, right? And so when I'm experiencing
Wow.
emotional pain on a level that is so intense that it is easier for me and my brain to process physical pain, often people will resort to self-harm behavior. And in a way, I'm wondering if dark magic is a metaphor for this, because what
It
happens,
is now.
it is like like, right, like, that's a through line that feels really interesting to me, because Claudia's in pain. She is really, really suffering, has no idea how to get rid of that pain, and so engages in this dark magic that, when you don't know the toll that it is taking on your body, we know it's dangerous. Viren's like, it's dangerous, but is he saying that because he just doesn't want Claudia to do it, or is there real danger? We know that there's some sort of effect on the body. We know that there's some sort of something, and so I'm just saying it feels like a metaphor for self harm, and so I'm curious, uh, how does that land with either or both of you? I'm curious if that's something you're like, no, that feels really whack. That's a weird connection you're making, or, but I don't know. It made
It's
sense in my opinion.
incredibly spicy.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, like, dark magic isn't, it does, I think, take a toll on the person that does it physically. It, I mean, we saw Callum get very, very ill because
Yeah.
of doing dark magic. There is a physical cost to it. I do want to say canonically, really quick, Viren wants her to learn dark magic. The
Hmm.
the thing she's doing is she's doing it without his careful guidance here.
Yes.
He doesn't want her to do so much that she experiences that. And I will say that very carefully. He wants to guide her very carefully through the process of learning dark magic, possibly to avoid those sorts of experiences,
Mhm.
the very, very negative side of it. But yes, the rest of it, I think I will leave this metaphor exploration up to the both of you.
Ugh,
I think it could fit lots of metaphors, though. Dark magic is
sure.
very
Yeah.
well, we don't have a lot of like hard and fast rules about, canonical rules about this is what dark magic is, and it does cause a lot of debate, which isn't bad. Dark magic can be self-harm. It can also be um kind of a sacrificial in a good way, like
Yeah.
genuinely when Viren brought back the heart of the Magma Titan and he cast that big spell that saved everybody. Surely that big of a spell must have cost him quite a bit of energy. I don't know exactly how he handled that, but he was the mage who did that spell, and that cost him something. As on top of the journey and the loss of Sarai and everything else that happened on that trip, which was very rough. That was a horrible trip. They had a bad time. But they
Yeah.
came back and he did the spell as well. That was the whole point. And he had to go through with it. It was kind of the plan is that I'm going to do this. I'm going to save everybody. But he knew offering that plan that he was a part of the cost of
Mm,
that plan. And he was willing to spend it. He was like, I will do
yeah.
this for everybody. Whatever he got from that personally, professionally, emotionally, who knows? You can decide that. But I think there is always, well, maybe not always, but there's always the possibility, the potential
Yeah.
that when you do any spell, primal spell, dark magic spell, anything, if it has an energy cost, that it really depends on the intent of the mage that's casting it.
Hmm.
Why am I doing this? Are you doing it for yourself? Are you doing it against somebody? Are you doing it for somebody? Both, all of the above. Um, it's it's
Yeah.
it's very complicated, and I think you have to consider you have the system itself, the magic and how it works, but then you have the people who are using it.
Yep.
And that always has to be a component of the magic that is being created. Because in Zadia, in the human lands, when a mage casts a spell, there is a cost. There is an engagement at least.
Yeah.
And that has to be part of how you consider how it works and what it's for.
Yeah.
And that makes it nice that it's that it can be variable. It can be taken lots of ways. It can be meant to lots of ways. And
There's a really fascinating track with dark magic in this show because and I had a longer discussion specifically on the ethical quandaries of the magma titan scenario with I actually that was an episode with Jason Simpson for everybody who wants to go back and listen to that was a really great episode. But what happened is often this show pits binary situations or seemingly binary situations with the use of dark magic in the sense of what do you mean you're not going to save 100,000 people for the life of one magma titan? That seems like a duh thing. But Sarai is the person that says, does it have a family? Does it have a life? Is it a person? Not necessarily human, but does it have personhood? Right?
mm-hmm,
And is it like in a lot of ethical people will say, is one life worth 1,000? And a universalist perspective will be like, of course, like 100,000 people is much very worth it. And then
mm-hmm,
the other people who say the means to the ends are you cannot sacrifice your means in order to achieve a really good end. And so it really just kind of depends on your ethical. But it feels like most of the time dark magic is on the table for big decisions. It's like, yeah, we know it's bad, but this seems like the best option. It's the same thing for Soren, right? We don't know the toll it has on Claudia, aside from we see a little bit of hair color change. But a doe for curing paralysis seems like a pretty fair trade. Like, but it's one of those things where like there's often in these binary situations where it's like they feel like um these smaller impetuses of dark magic instances of dark magic feel less consequential because these big moments are always like for good. uh
mm-hmm.
and I it makes it very complicated, right? And
It is.
what I think about this ficlet is that this is purely for her. This is not for someone else. This is
Mm-hmm,
for her. This is for her pain. And that's, I think, another reason why I was a little like here, because it has implications for bringing, dead people back. And then it gets in all kinds of funky things. Because what are the ethics of raising, human people from the dead, which is uh, something that we're going to encounter. So Interesting.
We already have. This is the same
Yeah.
spell that brought back the Smoky Assassins.
Oh, is
This is the
it?
same spell. It's the same spell.
It's the same
So,
spell as Smoke Wolves and the Smoky Assassins.
yeah.
Yes.
Interesting.
Except it's
I did
just for a
not
little
know
kitty, so
that.
it's like much as it's a softer, less taxing version. At least that's how I've sort of thought about it.
I didn't realize it was the same one that was used for the elves. That's fascinating.
Oh yeah. So
Oh my gosh.
there's another bead chain for you.
Okay. We're gonna have to.
That's something that's in the text in the weird little dark magic thing I read at like 9 p.m. while sick. It says something about it they will follow your instructions more or less. I don't remember exactly what I
Uh-huh.
wrote, but that's sort of what I was trying to get at was the assassin spell, like a super powerful dark mage who's not 8 years old and has like really really terrible intent could use this for to great consequence. But there's a contrast to Claudia using it just to bring back the kitty she liked. So I like that sort of spectrum of the applications of dark magic just in a vacuum.
Oh
Oh
my
yeah, yeah,
God.
yeah, yeah.
This is my head
Yeah.
exploding. Boom. Oh my goodness. Okay. Well, I did not make that connection. And now I have, and it changes the game. Okay. Woohoo. Um,
Yeah, there's a lot of implications knowing that this spell has now been canonically used 3 times.
yeah.
And each one is, has different reach and impact to it.
Significant
Yeah.
differences.
Yeah.
Well, y'all, I would love to just hear our listeners' thoughts on this. Like, what's going through your head when you make this connection? How are you feeling ethically after all this? Okay, so we've you know we've been diving into the depths of ethics here in dark magic. I'm curious if dark magic were in our world, right? And we have the capacity to use dark magic, whatever the metaphor may be, or literal dark magic. I'm curious if you have had a time in your life that you would have been tempted to use dark magic.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. I'd do it plenty.
Oh, oh,
I'd bring
interesting.
back all my dogs. Come on,
All of
all my
them, all the
dogs. Yeah.
time, like the permanent dogs. Uh, would you
Well, now
call
I
them?
don't want to say.
Or you don't
Mine
want
is
to?
much darker.
Yeah, much darker. Yeah, like
I mean, I could go darker. I'm being chill today. Totally chill.
being chill.
I think my threshold for using it is probably higher. I think I would just not use it. I'd be like, oh, it's fine. I'll just get by without it. And then if something really intense came along, then I'd
Yeah,
be like, okay, look, I have no other option. I think I'd feel like Claudia at age 8 if something really, really bad came along and I had this one way to fix it, I think I'd react like Claudia, like this is the worst thing ever, and there's only one way to fix it. So I'm not even gonna hesitate. I'm gonna jump. I'm gonna do it.
yeah,
Honestly, same though. I'm a really stubborn person, and if I can wrestle a situation under my control, I will absolutely do it. So I think I'd probably be a dark mage if given the power to do so.
yeah,
Yeah, we'd have our Breaking Bad moment somewhere out there
Oh
in
yeah.
the distance.
yeah. And I struggle with this. And I think just to kind of voice aloud, I I am inherently judgmental of dark magic based off of the what I have seen and what I have read and the way I have interpreted things and discussed things. I am pretty judgy of dark magic because it seems like there's an integrity issue with dark magic almost. Of it seems as though when we opt for what is fun, fast, and easy over what is right, so to speak, it's an integrity issue. And there's this implication that dark magic is not right. And I have a personal ethical quandary with raising the dead or using the dead's ashes to create an image of it even feels very irreverent and it seems like there's something that happens on a spiritual level that feels wrong to me, and I don't know that I can voice that well enough to articulate exactly why, but I know that my bias is like, that feels wrong. And
No,
there
no,
are
no, you're
times,
right. I mean, I'm definitely being flippant about it, to be clear. I think like
of course,
when
yeah.
I say like I would hastily do dark magic, I'm more like, yeah, I can see myself being pushed into a situation where I made
Well,
a choice,
and I
you
think that's my
know,
point.
and that's the humanity of it to me. That's why I think like that's why I really like working on this project is because like I can see all of the choices I've made in my life and all the ones that I regret or don't regret and sort of translate that metaphor up against dark magic and be like, did I do the spell? You know, like
Mm.
where do those things line up in my life and how spooky is that for me as a person, you know? Anyway.
Well, and I think that's exactly my point, though, is that it feels like this wrong thing. And I know I do it all the time, right? I think that's where I was landing is that I choose to be complicit in decisions that are actively harmful in the world. Like, I buy things off of Amazon, right? And that is, the
Little
why
compromises,
like
just little ones.
and I use a cell phone. Like just the fact that I use a smartphone is illustrating how complicit I am and all the things that like where did all the parts for this smartphone come from? Was it ethically sourced? Was it all this like when I buy certain things from a certain store, when I go like I am complicit in so much on a daily basis that is actively harming the world because corporate greed and I have no other like in it and that sucks. And I also know that I often don't have the willpower not to do it. But more importantly, I often don't have the resources not to do it, right? There are financial burdens that like I can't afford to buy books at local bookstores often because they're marked up to the point where I usually can't afford it to where I want to. It's the same thing with food. I can't afford local organic food often because it costs twice as much as it does. And so I'm forced into this quote like dark magic of having to like take things because it's faster, it's easier, right? And I think that's another thing that feels like dark magic, so to speak. So we heard Devon. Now I've heard a little bit of mine. Kris, what about you? Like you kind of said you were tempted, but what are your thoughts on that? I'm curious.
Um, ooh, well, okay. Dark magic does feel like it's made on it feels like it oh gosh, I let me get the words for this. No, it's good. I've got the idea in my head. It's uh, uh scarcity. It runs in a world where there's a finite amount
Yeah.
of what joy, justice, love, and there's never enough, and so you keep having to shift it around.
Mm,
There's not enough, so if I need it, I will take it, but that means you can't have any
yeah.
today.
Yeah.
But then maybe you take it from me later. Like dark magic seems to represent an existence where not everybody can be happy all the time. Somebody has to be sad, or
Yeah.
somebody has to be in pain while other people are comfortable. Um, it seems to, and it's not that it has to be that way for dark magic to work. It's more like because this system exists, dark magic has manifested
Yeah.
almost,
Yeah.
which is kind of in line with the lore a little bit. There was an imbalance, and dark magic came about.
Exactly.
See, this is where I'm going. Like we have people who have billions of dollars, and then we have people who uh, don't have enough money for food that week.
Yep.
This is in the same world. Is this necessary? No, but it keeps existing. Why? Why is it like this? And would you change that if you had dark magic and you could just do it? Would you do it? See, I think I was a little hasty earlier, and just like Claudia, I was thinking about myself. How would I use dark magic for myself? That was my first response, and I think that's perfectly valid. How do you better your life? If you could make one wish kind of thing, what would you do? And I think I wish that first wish for myself, but I think if I could take a second wish, I might wish on a more Viren level where I would consider the whole kingdom.
Yeah.
And
Like
and I would
find
be like, look, we can do better. We can be safer. We can have more food. We can be
yeah.
more alive. That sort of, why don't we all have this when we're all suffering?
I would
We're all,
Jeff Bezos's heart in my hand and give everyone plenty of money to spend in the world,
Yeah,
right?
that'd be a sick dark magic spell. Come on, let's go.
Like, I'm here for it, right? Like, is the toll on my body worth giving everybody in the world, $1 million? Like, and so like it's one of those things where like that feels like one person taking that is like that feels like a really ethical thing to do.
Yeah, the Magma Titan was secretly a billionaire.
Yeah.
Yeah, that Magma Titan was like massively capitalist, so it was good that we destroyed him.
Like here we are. This is how this ended. Like, okay. Oh wow. Okay. Yeah, like that. I think I could talk about dark magic for hours and talk about like all the things, all the things that it does, and people do. And I think that's what's so cool about this show, like as if it weren't cool already, that it just continues to and that's one of the definitions of what sacred means is a text or is a medium sacred, and the way that is one is determines that is it generative, and the Dragon Prince is certainly generative, right? People are constantly creating fanfics, are constantly drawing, are constantly creating from what is there, and if it's that means it's there's something really sacred about it, and at least to me. And so I just am really really grateful that we get to continue to engage in this practice, because it helps us live better in the world. Okay, my final question. Are you ready? This is heavy.
Bring it.
I'm curious about a fun pet name that you have used for a pet in the past or hope to use in the future, because Biscuit is a really great name for a cat, and I'm curious if you all have really good names for your pets.
Burnt Biscuit. I'm so proud of her.
Burnt Biscuit, I literally was like, oh. Like,
Okay.
I had a verbal reaction when I was
In
reading.
in the comments when Kris and I submitted the draft to the writing team, the comments were like the whole writing team highlighted that and went like, "Holy shit."
Yeah,
Wow. Like thirded. Oh my God. Like it was just this chain of reactions. And I was like, okay, we know that part's landing. That's good.
yeah, it landed.
I love very distinct pet names. Doesn't matter in which kind of category they're distinct, but the narrower and more unique the category that the name comes from, the more delightful it is. I had a cat when I was, oh gosh, this is so long ago. Middle school age, roughly, several years in each direction. It was mostly a white cat, and so I named him Edelweiss after the flower.
Ah, not after
Because my family has German roots, and I grew up watching the Sound of Music, and they have that song, Edelweiss. There we go.
And instantly hear it in my head. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, very specific names are delightful.
I like specific names too.
Well, my dog's names are Piper and Ember. And what I find more fun than the actual base names is the thing that you actually end up calling your pets. Um, and so Piper is not usually Piper. She's Peepo, she's Pip Pip, she's Pim Pam, she's Beepo. Uh,
So
Ember
cute.
is Emmy, she's Embo, she's Ember Dog. Um,
Embryo.
yeah, MB, like she's all sorts of like I love how they just become like a mishmash of sounds, and so Beepo, Emmy, they're
Inky
just
Dink.
Inky Bink, Ongle Bongle, just and they don't care.
Yep,
They
That's
just know the
adorable.
sounds, so it's fun, and yeah.
that's cute. Oh, wow. Yeah, I someone told me yesterday, it was funny. They were telling me about their dog, and they were saying, yeah, Mayonnaise went and did this, and I was like, excuse me. And so their dog's name is Mayonnaise, and I was like, where did that come from? And they said, oh, I thought it'd be funny, and I was like, it succeeded, it worked.
Very
Oh,
good.
that's a very specific name. Exactly. That's great. That's a good name.
Yeah,
um,
recently I learned that a coworker of mine has two dogs named Ryan Gosling, and the other one is called Ryan Reynolds, and I couldn't stop laughing.
that's awesome. Oh man. Well, listeners, we'd love to hear what your silly slash wonderful slash fun pet names are. I'm sure there are several. Feel free to post your pet alongside that. Tweet at us, BNB_pod. We'd love to hang out and see what's going on. Okay, I want to kind of bring us in and close us out with our usual activity, which is focusing on gratitude. And for our final gratitude, since this is a um, this is a lesson on grief, this little ficlet. And so I'm curious who in the Dragon Prince universe has taught you something about grief, and what are you grateful for that they have given you?
I'd have to pick Athari, actually.
Okay.
He had a rough time there. We met him for the first time when he was having he was having a week or two there. It was bad. It was rough. He didn't start off great. He reacted poorly at first. He got angry. But then he changed his mind and he helped because he still loved Rayla. He still wanted to help. He still wanted to be himself. And that was a choice in the middle of all of that. That must have been a hard choice, but I like to think that because he'd made that choice over and over and over for his family before, that he would choose to help when things were hard, that it was a lot easier that in that moment to make it for Rayla than it might have been if he wasn't already that kind of person.
Yeah.
So I am grateful for his example because times have been hard for all of us. We've all had a rough couple of years, possibly just like Athari has. We'll see, I suppose. So it's been really encouraging to see him get back up and help.
And that was an acute bout of grief, it feels like. With he thought he lost both Rayla and Runan, right? And
Yeah.
this idea of these candles that they light and or whatever these ornaments that they light up and then float on this little pond,
Oh yeah, the
right?
lotuses. Yeah.
Yeah, and then they sink when that person dies, and he saw one not there, but also like we still are unclear on whether he knows that it's like half floating.
Yeah, we don't know. I'm very interested in more of that story.
Yeah, so but at least
Closure
from
is
our
important.
perspective, it seems like he thinks he lost both of them.
Yeah.
And gosh, the I just imagine the all of the complicated feelings that are associated with grief that he offers us a chance to work through, right? Like
Yeah.
to see him work through that is just really, yeah, I
Yeah.
I love that. Well,
Strongest character to me.
well, thank you, Devon. How about you? Who are you grateful for?
Callum, our little baby boy, triple orphan.
Little baby Willie.
My little baby boy. He's lost three whole parents. I think he
Yeah.
has dealt a lot with grief in a way that I find massively resilient for a kiddo his age. He maintains a vibrant, you know, optimism and spirit, and despite like seeing all the things he's seen and going through the things he's gone through. So I find him inspiring. So he's a good boy.
I just love him. We see him like I again and in this rewatch, just him reading this letter from Harrow was just like, oh, this is so beautiful. It's like because we see him process. He's like cries multiple times in this show, which is wonderful to see young men cry, but also this moment where he says aloud, I don't know if I can do this, like at the very beginning of the letter. And it's just I love that he is so able to be expressive. And I think what a lesson that is, right? I'm so grateful for that too, that he's just showing us what it looks like to process grief in a way that seems like without pushing it away. He just lets it happen. And that's something that I'm so on board with that one. And so I guess my choice would be Harrow then, because Harrow probably made choices differently than I might have. And yet he was doing the best that he could with the information he had and the capacities that he had. And he gave Callum this really beautiful letter, right? And I just, one, really love letter writing. Two, I really love that he is, as difficult as it may have been to say that in person, he's still doing his best to get it out somehow. And so I think that's a lesson for me is like, what are the ways that even when it's hard to communicate how I'm feeling? Um, and so I'm grateful for Hero. Ah, what a trio we have. Ah. Well, now I feel better after our, dark depths of conversation. Now gratitude makes me feel more incredible. Okay, what did we miss? Did we miss anything that we need to touch on before we finish out?
I think we're
Pretty
good. I can't
thorough.
think of anything.
Awesome. Okay, well, you haven't shared the way that you might want to be contacted since that first opening with our covering the reflections at large. I'm curious if you all would love to share your Twitter handles perhaps again so that people who want to find you can.
Oh yeah, I'm Sellsword Kris on Twitter. Hit me up or block me, whatever.
I am at Devon Giehl. Very simple.
Okay. Well, you heard it from them, folks. This has been another full, lovely mini episode of Bending Not Breaking. We will be back in the next couple of weeks, starting to cover season 4 of The Dragon Prince, which is just an incredible thing to say out loud. And I look forward to sharing all of those episodes with you. But until next time, be well and do good.